Hey guys, today we're doing our first monk build for the 2024 Player's Handbook, or D&D 5.5. Now, I really like this monk build specifically because it uses all of the new mechanics for monks, specifically that monks are good at grappling now. And a grappling monk is something that wasn't really great in D&D 5e, so I'm really excited to see what we can do with it here and how we can make it better than in 5e doing this unique archetype. So without further ado, let's get into it. For this build, the first thing we're going to do is define our species, and we're going to do everything out of the 2024 Player's Handbook, doing all the species, backgrounds, classes, everything out of there, so that anybody with just that one book can still do this build. The species we're going to do for this one is Goliath. Now we're going to do the Stone Goliath variant to help us reduce damage, which is going to help with a couple things later. But the real reason we really want Goliath is for large form. What large form does is it allows us to be large, which allows us to in turn grapple up to huge creatures, which for a grapple-centric character, that is a huge opportunity for us to have that kind of extra range for what we can grapple. For the background we're going to take, the one I'm looking at is Sailor. Sailor gives us the Tavern Brawler Feat, which is going to be great for some of the things we can do with grappling, and then also it's going to give us an option to increase our dexterity and our wisdom, which are of course Monk's main two stats. So putting our points there is going to be great. We want to prioritize dexterity a little bit more than wisdom, and we'll probably want an odd dex so we can take a feat later to round that out. Now what Tavern Brawler does for us is it lets us re-roll ones that we roll on our unarmed attacks as a monk, which is going to be great because we're going to be making a ton of those, and it just ups our damage by a little bit. Tavern Brawler also lets us push as part of the same attack, which is kind of a niche benefit, but it's something we can use to do a lot of interesting things with this build. Now for this build, our first level is going to go into Monk, and this level in Monk, there's not a ton of changes. The big one is that we can now use our bonus action unarmed attack from our martial arts without making the weapon attack as the attack action. And the second one is that now we can use our dexterity for grapple checks. And this is huge for a monk. I think it's one of the really requested changes that will just allow monks a lot more martial flexibility to be this great grappler on top of this great unarmed fighter. I think it is a really great change. I'm really excited for it. Now on our second level in Monk, we get a bunch of improvements in our focus points. Now focus points are the new version of key points, but our options for using them are quite a bit better. First off, our Flurry of Blows no longer requires that we make the attack action. Secondly, each of Step of the Wind and Patient Defense gained a buff where we can use it as a bonus action without expending any of our focus points to do the dash or disengage actions, and then if we spend a focus point, we can either take the disengage or dodge actions on top of that. So it makes that feature a lot more key efficient, which is great. And we also get Uncanny Metabolism. Now one of Monk's previous big problems was that they didn't have enough key points, and now with the switch to focus points, we have the better efficiency, and we also get Uncanny Metabolism, allowing us to regain a bunch of those focus points all in one go. So now we have greater efficiency, and we just have more key points in general. It's a great time for the Monk. At level 3, we are going to pick our subclass, and the Monk subclass I'm going for here is the Way of the Open Hand. Now this open hand, the real benefits for the Grappler Monk is going to come in later, so you really could pick any subclass for these earlier levels, but for those later levels, open hand comes in handy a ton. But even its benefits for when we use Flurry of Blows are pretty good. It allows us to be kind of a hit and run and get that high damage output while we're doing these normal monk things. So for these first levels where we're not grappling, it is great. And also at level 3, as a melee monk, one of the big changes that's also really great for us is our Deflect Missiles is now Deflect Attacks, and now it also works for melee attacks. So this is actually a pretty big buff for us as a melee monk, where we're gonna be up in melee for a ton of combat. And for later on when we start grappling and a creature can only really attack us and not our enemies because of our positioning, it allows us to deflect those attacks really well and reduce the damage. It just makes it a lot more tanky on top of our Stone Goliath stuff, which we already have. At level 4, we are gonna pick up the Grappler Feat. Now the Grappler Feat lets us put a +1 into our dex, rounding that out, hopefully. And now this feat does a couple things for us. First, once per turn when we hit a creature with an unarmed strike, we can attempt to grapple them without losing out on our damage. This is great for just efficiency's sake. Secondly, we get advantage on attacks against a creature that we have grappled. Also amazing. This is just going to be basically consistent advantage because our grappling is just going to be that great. And third, and potentially the most valuable, is that when we have a creature grappled that is our size size or smaller, we don't have to expend extra movement when we move ourselves and them around. With Goliath's large form, this can be large and smaller, which is a ton of the creatures we're going to face. And when we have a huge creature, we can still move them around at half speed, but now that our bonus action dash doesn't require focus points, it is a lot more efficient, and we can do that every turn repeatedly. And one big change that they made in D&D 5.5 that makes this great, before we can capitalize on our own high movement speed to do damage or different things, we can use our allies too. The big change is that in D&D 5.5, spells like Spirit Guardians or other area of effect type spells now proc once per turn when a character enters the space. This is great because we can grab an enemy, drag them into our allies' space of Spirit Guardians, and it deals damage. And we can do that with every ally that has one of those AoE spells going. This allows us to capitalize on that high movement speed through our allies' spells and effects before we can do it ourselves. And level 5 in Monk is basically the same. We get extra attack and stunning strike, but after Monk 5, we are gonna deviate from Monk for a few levels into Druid. Now the first level in Druid, not a ton going on, but we get a lot of great utility cantrips and utility first level spells. We also get things like Cure Wounds and Healing Word, which are much more significant in this new D&D 5.5, where these healing spells get their dice amount doubled, so we can actually be a pretty efficient healer as a monk with one level in Druid. Really great for us to have kind of this healing playstyle on the side with utility and other things we can do. Second level in Druid, we get Wild Shape and Wild Companion. This is going to be helpful for out of combat utility with Wild Shape and having that familiar around, not so much in combat that I can foresee. And our third level in Druid is where we really start to kick off. The subclass I'm going to take is the Circle of Stars. The reason for this is we get Guiding Bolt a bunch of times a day, and this is great to have a long range option, which we already don't really have as a monk, so this is a great option for that. But the bigger reason is that we get to pick up our Starry form. And for this Starry form, we're going to be going with the Dragon. The reason that this Dragon is really important is because it allows us to basically never drop our concentration unless we're taking a huge amount of damage all at once. And before this point, we weren't really concentrating on anything, but at third level, we also get access to Druid's second level spells, including Spike Growth. Now, Spike Growth didn't change very much from 5e, but it is still a great spell for this grappling playstyle. Previously in 5e, monks weren't the best at this because it was hard to get a good grappling monk, but now when we do this, we can use Spike Growth and we can get this great damage by utilizing our speed. Right now, our speed is like 65 feet, and then when we dash, switch is a ton of damage, and then it's 2d4 for every 5 feet. So basically, at this level, if we have one enemy in our hands that's large or smaller, if we have all this set up, we can do 44 d4 damage in one turn. And then we can do that every turn after that, with even potentially 2 enemies grappled. And that damage just keeps compounding. This is a really great combo once we get it up and running. And the really nice thing about this combo is it's really easy for us to keep it going once it's set up. If we have a creature grappled, if they're able to break out of it, we can then use things like Open Hand Technique to knock them prone, or we can use Stunning Strike to keep them there. And even if all of that fails, our movement speed is high enough, we can sprint over to them, grab them, and then run them back to the Spike Growth, basically without losing much out of it. So this is something we can set up really consistently. And we can keep it going because if enemies start to attack us, we have our Stone Goliath reduction in damage, we have the Deflect Attacks option, and we can keep our concentration going basically endlessly with our Dragon Constellation. So if people are attacking us, we have a lot of great ways to mitigate that. Now, after these 3 levels in Druid, we could go further in there, especially if you want to get more casts of Spike Growth or you want to get another ASI there. I am going to go back into Monk, and this just gets us more focus points and more Monk features, because the Monk features are actually really good now. The one I'm looking forward to the most is our level 11 feature in the Open Hand Monk, and this is called Fleet Step. What Fleet Step does is when we take any bonus action, it also gives us the benefits of the dash action. And this is amazing because we can now Flurry of Blows and then bonus action dash again, which gives us just a ton of damage off of that Spike Growth, and it gives us a ton that we can do in that instance. And it also makes our setup faster, so when we use a bonus action to go into our large form or use a bonus action to set up our Starry form, we can immediately take the dash action to start setting up that combo that much quicker. Overall, this build is really simple, but it's really effective. We've done similar builds in 5e, but they were always hard to make work, and it was kind of putting a square into a circle hole. It just didn't fit right. but we can make it work. Now this fits really easily. This flows super well and is a really seamless build. I really like this build. I really like all the changes they did to Monk, and I'm super excited to have more Monk builds in the future. With that, let us know what you guys think of this build, and if you aren't already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. We have a lot of other D&D 5.5 2024 player handbook builds coming out, and if you want to see them, please subscribe to the channel, and your support means a lot. With that, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.